Good afternoon and welcome back to the Public Service Commission as we resume the hearing in docket 2023-70-G concerning the application of Dominion Energy South Carolina Incorporated for adjustments to its natural gas rates and tariff schedules. Let's take a roll call of commissioners. With us virtually, we have Commissioner Irvin and Commissioner Justin Williams present in the hearing room. We have Commissioner Thomas, Commissioner Carol Lee Williams, Commissioner Caston, and Chair Belser. As we left, we have a panel of Dominion witnesses on the stand, and we are still on Commissioner questions. Commissioners, any questions for this panel? Then maybe it's just me. Ms. Smith, I'm going to start with you. In your stipulation testimony on page 5, you discussed that the stipulation accepts the revisions and changes to the company's PGA firm gas-only tariff.
Yes.
You with me?
Yes.
And I just want a clarification. What does that do to the net interruptible revenue credit?
And so are you speaking specifically of the recommendations from ORS witness Watkins?
Well, I'm talking about, is that going to remove that? Dominion, I believe, had recommended removal of the net interruptible revenue credit.
We did, but that that recommendation was not it didn't come specifically from ORS witness Watkins. So the recommendations that we accept from ORS witness Watkins, and I'm looking on lines 10 through 17, is that
okay.
what you're referring
yes,
to?
Ma'am.
Okay. And so the recommendations from ORS witness Watkins is separate from the net interruptible revenue credit. He had 2 recommendations. The first one is that we use our current process for calculating our cost of gas for firm customers, that we use that same process for our interruptible customers. And we currently use a rolling 12-month average to determine the cost of gas factors. But that, as it stands right now, is only for firm customers. So since we are introducing a new interruptible sales tariff, then one of his recommendations was to use that same process to update the cost of gas for interruptible customers, interruptible rates. And then his second recommendation was related to how the demand cost of gas is allocated. Currently, we use a 50-50 weighting of the peak day design forecast and forecasted sales. And his recommendation is that we only use the peak day forecast. So those were the 2 recommendations from ORS witness Watkins that we have accepted.
Okay. Well, I believe that there was a recommendation from the DCA's witness to not remove the net interruptible revenue credit. Is that correct?
That is correct. And
right. What is happening to the net interruptible revenue credit as a result of this stipulation?
It is still being proposed to be removed, eliminated.
Okay. That's what I'm trying to get straight on.
Yes, sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
So it would if the stipulation is approved, the NIRC would go away.
That's correct.
Okay, that's where I was going with that. Just wanted confirmation. Can you look at the stipulation for me on page 10? And I think I was told yesterday I needed to ask you this. If I got the wrong witness, I'm sorry. And I'm in paragraph 18, and that sentence reads, the stipulating parties agree the margin revenue changes resulting from the stipulation will be allocated as specified as by ORS witness Watkins, except as specified in paragraph 18. Is that correct?
That should reference paragraph 17. Okay. Instead of 18, the numbers moved around a little bit as we were negotiating. And so paragraph 17 is related to the basic facilities charges. And so it's saying that we would adopt the allocations from ORS witness Watkins except as specified in paragraph 17, which is the BFC.
Okay. That helps. Thank you. I just want, can you just give me a simple explanation of of what margin revenue is versus cost of gas revenue?
Yes, so the margin revenue is going to be basically the revenues that are collected from customers to support your base business. So that would be all revenues excluding fuel costs or cost of gas.
Okay. I think that's all for the moment. So, Mr. Taylor, how are you this afternoon?
Well, thank you.
Mr. Taylor, in conducting a cost of service study, what's the goal, the ultimate goal?
The ultimate goal is to have insights into the relative cost to serve the classes so that you can make decisions on revenue targets and rate design.
Is there in any cost of service study and resulting rate design, is there ever a situation where there isn't some sort of subsidization either between or among the classes? Can you ever get to zero on?
I've been doing this for almost 20 years. It's 18 or so, and I've never seen an instance in which there was not some subsidies across the classes. Even in instances in which there's an attempt to reduce them, it's never 100% reduction. Usually you move halfway there or a quarter of the way there. And of course, if you do that every couple of years in rate cases, you never quite get there. So the subsidies tend to exist.
Well, I think from prior proceedings, I've heard talk about moving the classes toward parity and toward evenness, but theory and actual practice are often two different things, is it not?
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd also note that under the company's proposal to increase the residential and SGS class and provide no increase to MGS and LGS, there is movement towards parity. And you can see that as a reduction to the parity ratios or the revenue to cost ratios. So there's movement. The real debate is how quickly and to what degree do you move, and that's where the various parties have differing positions.
So under the stipulation, based on your answer, there is movement toward reducing the differences in cost of service among the classes?
Yes.
And under the stipulation, is there a decrease to the medium general service and large general service classes as far as their rates? I know it's one thing to talk about rates and then separate talk about the actual bill, but
So that the total revenues for the LGS class will be reduced. MGS does experience an increase, and that's across the group of customers, which would be similar to the average customer. Of course, each customer's particular bill impact will depend on the characteristics of how they operate, in particular their load factor. And then in this circumstance, it'll depend on if they move to, if a rate 35 customer moves to 34 to 36 and where they feel like they can most economically be served by the company.
okay. Thank you. I do need to come back to you, Ms. Smith. You're sponsoring the tariff pages, are you not?
That's correct.
So under the new, and I don't remember which rate, but the new firm tariff, let's see which one that will be. Let's look at, I think is that 36 firm transportation service?
Yes, that's
the new one?
firm transportation. Yes.
If a large customer takes firm transportation service, is there going to be capacity on the lines to get their gas to them?
And so I think the answer to that is it depends. It's going to depend on the analysis that will be performed by the company. And it would also depend on rate 35 closing, because that standby service is creating issues in providing firm service to additional customers.
So if the standby service under rate 35 is, if the proposal that Dominion made and the stipulation, if that standby service goes away, that will free up some capacity for larger customers needing transportation service to get the gas to them?
It's my understanding that it would on DESC system. So under rate 36, the customer will still have to secure the upstream.
They've got to purchase it at
through
the
a market
wellhead or wherever, the
Correct.
market or whatever.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. But as it exists now, there is, if the other is freed up, there is capacity that will be able to be utilized by these bigger customers that buy their own gas and need the transportation service.
My understanding is that there is some. How much, witness Jackson is probably a better person to address how much capacity there is than I am.
And then if somebody were to take the interruptible transportation service under rate 55, would they purchase their own gas from a marketer or at the wellhead, or would they take gas under interruptible service 54?
So rate 55 is interruptible transportation. So under that rate, they would have to secure gas through a marketer, or they could act as their own kind of pooler.
Okay.
Rate 54
And
is
that's just transportation.
that's just transportation.
But they could be interrupted.
That is correct.
Okay,
Rate
and
54 is the interruptible sales, where they would be, the company will provide them with the gas supply under rate 54.
But they could be interrupted.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioners, any further questions for this panel? Mr. Richardson, any redirect?
Madam Chair, that concludes the company's case in chief, and we ask that all witnesses be excused, subject to your your condition.
Mr. Richardson, you know I'm going to say that they can stand down, but they're only excused at your peril. So
I understand. Just want to recognize
y'all
your
keep
condition.
trying. I appreciate that fact, but you know my answer. So,
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your testimony today. You may stand down. Mr. Hall, do you have a matter?
Yes, briefly, Chair Belzer. I've learned that the department's witness, Dr. Dismukes, has a conflict this afternoon. To the extent we get to the department's case, I know we have a few witnesses still to go. I was going to call Mr. Rothschild first. I've spoken with the other parties, and I haven't heard any objections to that. Again, depending on if we even get to our case today.
That's fine.
Okay.
We'll work with that.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for bringing it to our attention. The company is rested, so next we go, I reckon, to Mr. Elliott. No, we're going to. I'm sorry. Let me find my list. I'm going down the line. And
CMC still withdrawn their witness.
Correct.
Otherwise,
Mr. Spear. Yeah, I apologize. I need to put y'all in my order.
Thank you, Chair Belser, Taylor Spear for Direct Energy. I have two pieces of good news. Most important is no one's going to have to hear from me today. But number two, my law firm pulled the former chair of the North Carolina Public Staff out of retirement, and he is going to be addressing the witness today. So with your liege, Chair Belser, I will turn it over to Mr. Drews, who is appearing virtually. Our witness is Andrew Miller.
And Mr. Miller's virtual as well.
Correct.
Okay.
Chair Belser and Commissioners, want to thank you very much for admitting me pro hoc vice in this proceeding and for allowing me and Mr. Miller to appear virtually. It's very much a convenience, and we're thankful. At this point, we would present Andrew Miller as Direct Energy Business Marketing's witness. He's available to be sworn in.
Okay. Once we get him on the screen, we will administer the oath.
He's on my screen.
He's on mine.
Okay.
We'll have you both on the same screen in just a few minutes. We have to do a little bit of juggling. Good afternoon, Mr. Miller. Can you hear me?
Good afternoon. Yes.
Mr. Miller, I'm going to ask that you raise your right hand, please. We got a little lag here, so bear with me. Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You may put your hand down, and Mr. Drews, you're recognized.
Mr. Miller, would you state your full name for the record, please?
Andrew Miller,
And who are you employed by?
NRG, which is the parent company of Direct Energy.
Okay, and what's your business position or title with NRG?
I am the Regional Gas Operations Manager.
Do your duties involve work for Direct Energy as well?
Yes.
Are you the same Andrew Miller that caused to be pre-filed direct testimony consisting of 8 pages and 1 exhibit on July 11th, 2023 in this proceeding?
Yes.
And do you have any corrections to that testimony or that exhibit?
No.
If I were to ask you the same questions today under oath, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Madam Chair, I move that Mr. Miller's direct testimony and the accompanying Exhibit 1 be admitted into the record as if orally given from the stand.
Bear with me a second. Let me get my papers together. Mr. Drews's pre-filed direct testimony will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand. And Mr. Miller's exhibit will be marked for identification as hearing Exhibit 12 and received into the record of this case. His direct exhibit.
Thank you. Mr. Miller, are you the same Andrew Miller that caused to be pre-filed on August 11th? Sir, rebuttal testimony consisting of 9 pages and 1 exhibit.
Yes.
Do you have any corrections to that testimony or exhibit?
No.
If I were to ask you the same questions under oath today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Madam Chair, again, I will move that Mr. Miller's sir, rebuttal testimony be admitted into the record as if orally given from the stand, and that his exhibit be identified and admitted at the appropriate time.
Mr. Miller's sir rebuttal testimony will be entered into the record as if given from the stand. And I just want to make sure that I did accept his direct testimony into the record as well. And his sir rebuttal exhibit will be marked for identification as hearing exhibit number 13 and received into the evidence of this case.
Thank you. Mr. Miller, are you offering a summary of either your direct or sir rebuttal testimony?
No, I am not.
Okay, we're trying to move this along. After you pre-filed your direct and sir rebuttal testimony, did Direct Energy engage in settlement negotiations with Dominion and other parties in this proceeding?
Yes, that is correct.
And did you reach settlement terms of agreement with Dominion?
We did.
And are those agreeable settlement terms between Direct Energy and Dominion Energy South Carolina incorporated into the stipulation that was filed August 21st in this proceeding?
Yes, they are.
Okay. In your opinion, are those settlement terms a fair and reasonable compromise among the parties with regard to the issues in this proceeding?
Yes, we feel that there are a reasonable compromise given the proposals.
What is Direct Energy's recommendation regarding that stipulation?
Direct Energy's recommendation is to accept the terms of the stipulation and settlement.
When you say accept, are you recommending that the commission approve those terms?
Correct.
Okay. Madam Chair, Mr. Miller is available for cross-examination at this time and for any questions from commissioners.
Thank you, Mr. Drews. They're part of the settlement. So, Mr. Elliott. Mr. Miller, I'm going to ask that if you can talk more directly into your microphone. You are coming across very softly in the hearing room. Mr. Elliott, would you turn on the microphone, please?
As you know, my wife tells me my voice carries, and she's always hushing me, so I apologize. All right, Mr. Miller, thank you for appearing this afternoon. You are familiar with the Dominion testimony concerning the allegation of arbitrage of rates, are you not, sir?
Yes, that's correct.
And drawing your attention in particular to page 15 of Ms. Jackson's rebuttal testimony, you will find where she lays out this allegation in which she, on the one hand, indicts no marketer, but on the other hand, indicts every marketer of arbitrage based on rate 35. You're familiar with this testimony, are you not, sir?
Yes, I am.
All right, now let's make it very clear. I want to give you the chance, but you and Direct Energy Marketing have never engaged in this kind of behavior, have you?
No, we have not. Our first commitment and obligation is supplying our customers. So on Dominion system, it presents a challenge with curtailments of certain categories of customers. And in the event that a curtailment occurs, it's a possibility we would have to divert gas supply from an industrial account on rate 35 that is curtailed to another market. So that would be the only situation where that would occur.
All right, good. Now, I want to explore that with you a minute, but I do want to ask you a couple of additional questions. And first, I believe you testified that you are aware of no other marketer who has ever engaged in this kind of behavior as alleged by Dominion, correct?
I can't speak to other marketers, but you know, that's kind of outside the realm of what I understand. I can really only speak on behalf of NRG and Direct Energy.
Excellent. Now, isn't it true that for you in particular and your firm to be successful in this line of work, that you must produce results for your clients? Isn't that true?
That's correct.
All right. And it's important as a part of your duties and responsibilities that you be able to produce energy when it's possible, correct?
That's correct.
And to keep your customers, you must not only deliver, but you must also exhibit an exemplary ethic. Isn't that true?
Yes, absolutely.
And would it be a good marketing ploy for you and for Direct Energy to game the system so that you can make money at the expense of your clients and at the expense of the company?
No, that's not a good business model and something we don't follow. And I'll give you an example of rate 35. So
Please.
Rate 35, you're trued up daily based off of usage and consumption and cash out on a monthly basis. So you have to balance the individual customer at a monthly level. Otherwise, they're subject to a cash out from the utility. that could be unfavorable. So it's in our best interest in maintaining that relationship. And then it's really in our best interest to make sure that adequate or sufficient supply is being matched to consumption.
All right, good. Now, while we are focused on Ms. Jackson's testimony on page 15 of her surrebuttal, Ms. Jackson discusses that gas prices reached $140 per decatherm on Transco Zone 5 on Christmas Eve 2022. Do you recall that to be the case?
Yes.
Now, Ms. Jackson goes on in making her allegations to say that marketers sell rate 35 gas purchased marketers sell rate 35 gas purchased at the first of the month at $11.40. Is it your recollection that gas roughly on December 1, 2022 was priced at $11.40?
No, and I'd also like to add that's kind of a generalized pricing structure for a customer. What's great about the deregulated system is choice and options. And based off of market participant, marketer, you have the option of structuring a gas supply deal in a way that fits the needs of the customer. So it's not necessarily tied to the first of the month index price of Transco Zone 5. It could be fixed in at a rate. It could float. There are other variables at play.
So it might be a little more than her $11.40, and it might be less, correct?
Correct.
Now, Dominion is in the market at the same time you and other marketers are in the market buying gas, are they not?
That's my understanding, yes.
And using her example, for instance, Dominion might have purchased gas ahead of December 24 of 2022 at amount much lower than $140 per decatherm, correct?
Correct.
And you understand that Dominion also has gas storage, do you not?
Yes.
And Dominion might have, in December of 2022, had natural gas in storage, prudently prepared to meet an eventuality like Winter Storm Elliott. Isn't that true?
That's a possibility, yes.
And if Dominion had gas in storage, you would have expected them to have bought the gas at a price much less than $140 a decatherm, correct?
Yeah, you could use the weighted average cost of injection season to come up with a rough estimate.
And would you venture a rough estimate based on your experience for the year 2022 for Dominion storage?
Yeah, I can't speak to that.
It might have been as low as $3 or $4 a decatherm, mightn't it?
It's very possible, yes.
All right, sir. And so if Dominion were forced to honor its standby tariff on December 24th, if it were forced to do so, it might be providing gas at $11.40 per decatherm, or perhaps even from storage at $3 or $4 per decatherm. Isn't that possible?
That's possible.
Now, I believe you testified that you would agree with Ms. Jackson's testimony, quote, standby service was intended to be a bridge to transportation service and to provide customers with a backup if a marketer could not deliver gas to customers. Do you recall her testifying to that? And do you recall on page 1 of your surrebuttal agreeing with that language?
Yes.
You testified that if customers have standby service backup, they can seek gas supply at competitive rates through their marketers. And that's, in fact, what you do, correct?
Correct.
And you went on to testify that where you disagreed with Dominion is that it is anti-competitive for Dominion to close rate 35 with standby service and create a new rate 36 for firm transportation service. You recall testifying to that?
That's correct.
Now, isn't it true that standby service under rate 35 is especially important on the Dominion distribution system because there are more capacity constraints on the interstate pipeline serving Dominion than any other local distribution companies that you're aware of? Isn't that true?
That's correct. That's accurate.
Now, let's go back to Christmas Eve of 2022 and Ms. Jackson's testimony. Do you recall whether on Christmas Eve of 2022, whether Dominion was able to transport any gas, except any gas at any city gate on its system on that day?
I don't know all of the details, so I can't really speak to that.
All right, sir. Now, there's been a great deal of testimony about the constraints of Dominion's constraints in gas capacity, and you are familiar with CGT, are you not?
Correct.
Carolina Gas Transmission is the name.
Gas, yep.
And isn't it true that Dominion owns virtually 100% of all the capacity on CGT?
That's correct. I believe it's 99.96%.
Now, I think that you testified that the standby service as a bridge mentioned by witness Jackson should stay in place until there's enough pipeline capacity to make firm transportation service more reliably firm. Do you recall testifying to that?
Yes, correct.
And I think under the proposal, Dominion's proposal, I think that they are proposing rate 36 as a transportation tariff. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's a firm transportation tariff, isn't that true?
Firm transportation, yeah, with pooling.
Now, you were here this afternoon for the conclusion of the previous panel's testimony, and you understood one Dominion witness to say that she was not aware that Dominion would be able to meet all the demand for firm transportation under rate 36. Do you recall her saying that?
Yes. She also, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, pointed to support on that from Rose Jackson, Miss Jackson.
All right. And in fact, as I understand the stipulation, the best that you all could do in reaching the stipulation on firm capacity is to elicit a promise from a Dominion that it would try really, really hard to give you additional capacity on rate 36. Is that a fair characterization?
Allow for a little longer runway in time for the industrial class to try to get ahead of anything. Yes. And then also a proposal of a capacity, some semblance of a capacity release program.
But isn't it true, Mr. Miller, that Dominion steadfastly refused to guarantee you any capacity correct?
They only
Just
guaranteed.
wait a minute. Hold on. There's an objection. Mr. Anselmo, please go to the microphone.
Thank you, Chair Belzer. Mr. Elliott has just asked the witness to delve into the confidentiality afforded by Rule 408 of our Rules of Evidence in regard to settlement discussions, and as such, it is an improper question and cannot be answered.
Mr. Elliott, would you rephrase the question to
Yes, ma'am.
avoid
Yes, ma'am.
discussions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Anselmo. Isn't it true that Dominion refused to give you, to guarantee you gas capacity? Well,
How is that? That's Mr. Elliott. If you're asking in the settlement,
if you read that stipulation, there's language in there that says we're going to try really, really hard.
you can ask him about the terms of the stipulation. You cannot ask him about discussions related to getting to the stipulation. That's my understanding of the rule of evidence.
All right, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Anselmo. Y'all getting a guarantee from firm capacity out of Dominion as a result of this settlement?
Are we getting a guarantee?
Yes, sir.
It's hard to say. There is any specific information related to like a comprehensive capacity release program. So I guess that's my only response to that question.
All right, sir. I'll accept it. Move on. Now, you talked about a runway that offered by the stipulation, and I think what you were referring to is that the stipulation states that rate 35 will not be terminated until maybe April of 2025. Do I have that date correct from memory?
Yeah, March 31st, 2025. So 2 winters.
All right, sir. Now, I want to talk a little bit about that runway. 18 months would unlikely give any of your industrial customers or any of the company's industrial customers time to design, permit, install, and operate some sort of alternative fuel generating source. Isn't that true?
It's hard to say. For new industrial customers, it's likely easier. For existing, it's probably more challenging. So
right.
an 18-month runway might be hard for the alternative fuel switchover to occur.
And with respect to the new customers, the new development, these industries that are attracted to South Carolina for any of a number of reasons, and we would submit rate 35 being one of them. If in the absence of a rate 35, they would be able to design some sort of a propane generating source or some other sort of perhaps even a solar, but some other sort of generating source, and they could construct it while they're constructing the plant, correct?
Correct.
Now, I think you testified that one of the benefits to your rate 35 customers was that in addition to having the benefit of your marketing efforts, providing cheaper gas than Dominion might be able to provide, is that the standby service acts as a backstop whereby the company's rate 35 customers would have guaranteed service, correct?
Correct.
And as these rate 35 customers are looking to transition to another rate, if that is the will of this body, a transportation tariff, I think it's 34, but you correct me if I'm wrong, a transportation tariff is not likely an interruptible tariff is not likely going to be a reasonable alternative. Wasn't that your testimony?
I believe, well, the point I was trying to convey was, so with the elimination of rate 35, the only true alternative for firm service, given the capacity situation on CGT and all the capacity being fully subscribed, even though rate 36 is offered as a firm pulling option, marketers would not be able to supply reliably under that tariff without the ample capacity to support firm deliveries. So the alternative would be customers would fall back on the sales service, which is rate 34.
And rate 34 is more expensive than rate 35 in your experience, is it not?
That's correct.
Now, you are aware that the company's witness testified that that the residential customers and the small commercial customers were subsidizing Dominion's rate 35 customers. Do you recall the Dominion witness's testimony to that effect?
Yes, I do.
But now, I believe that you heard Mr. Taylor, just as I did, testify that when he performed his cost of service study, he found that the large general service customers, the industrial customers, were actually subsidizing the residential customers. Did you understand Mr. Taylor to testify to that?
Yes, that was my understanding.
And in fact, I think you recognize, as I do, that at the point in time of the rate of the cost of service study, the industrial customers were paying 26% more than their cost of service. Was that your understanding?
Yes, and I incorporated that into the my SIR rebuttal.
Yes, sir. Now, you testify a little bit in your SIR rebuttal about the Dominion's concern that they must go out and get 20-year contracts, whereas they have managed to manipulate the rate 35 customers down to virtually all on a 30-day contract. Do you recall testifying to that in your SIR rebuttal testimony?
Yes.
And would you explain for the commission why you found Dominion's argument to fail here?
So, as I understand the tariff, the Carolina Gas Transmission Tariff, which was updated in 2020, so it's possible that 20-year agreement of term at some point before 2020 was 20 years. But I could only find a long-term commitment on firm transportation, a minimum subscribed year of 10 years. So I wasn't really able to identify anything other than 10 years. Additionally, based off of the pipeline, capacity relief can occur on a monthly, seasonal, or annual basis as well.
And since the company has been providing standby service for 25 years, they should have sufficient resources to continue to meet that obligation, shouldn't they?
I would assume if they have that built into their planning and strategy, yes.
Now, you testified in your rebuttal that, in your view, your recommendation would be that that rate 35, this bridge that Ms. Jackson testified to, be extended until such point that Dominion has sufficient capacity to meet all of its gas needs, generation, retail, all gas needs. Wasn't that your testimony?
That's accurate.
And you are aware from following the proceedings that Dominion has submitted a integrated resource plan to this commission, which proposes the addition of up to about 1,800 megawatts of generation capacity going forward. Is that true?
Yes.
And because you've been following this, you understand that Dominion has recently begun to seek additional gas capacity from the upstream interstate pipelines to obtain gas for these electric generators. You understand that to be the case, don't you?
Yes.
And you further understand that the process will take about 5 to 7 years. Did you understand that testimony in this docket?
Yes.
And so the settlement agreement takes industrial customers out to 2025. Would it be your testimony that that until Dominion has sufficient gas capacity to guarantee service to its existing customers, its existing industrial customers, and future industrial customers, they should maintain this rate 35 standby system? Is that your testimony?
That's my testimony, but I also added that at a minimum, three additional years.
I understand. Thank you. Now, just in close, is it still your testimony that with respect to Dominion, a choice between rate 36 firm transportation and rate 34 sales service is anti-competitive in comparison to the choice between rate 35 with standby service and rate 34?
Yes. Without a capacity release program, there's an elimination of rate 35. There really aren't going to be very many options for industrial customers that were previously served on 35.
All right, Mr. Miller, you've been very patient with me. I appreciate your testimony. It was really quite well done, and I professionally enjoyed the opportunity to question you about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. Mr. Burgess, Anselmo, Richardson.
Chair Belzer, under the stipulation, we don't have the
Oh,
ability
thank
to
you. Thank you very
return.
much. Commissioners, questions for this witness? Mr. Miller, how are you this afternoon?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Fine, thank you. You filed pre-file testimony in this case, yet you signed on to the stipulation, and you've proposed that the commission adopt the stipulation, have you not?
That's correct.
So has your pre-file testimony changed?
No, pre-filed testimony has not changed.
Then, but you find that the stipulation is fair and reasonable?
It meets the needs of NRG because the other alternative was based off of the closure of the rate 35 more immediately.
Okay.
And we felt it was in our best interest to settle on reasonable terms.
On reasonable terms. Thank you, sir. Mr. Spear? Any?
Yeah, it's this is David.
Oh,
Drews.
I'm sorry, Mr. Drews. I apologize.
If you don't mind, very brief redirect here.
Thank you.
And this relates to Chair Belser's questions. Has the position of Direct Energy, by engaging in this settlement, superseded your direct and sir rebuttal testimony?
No.
Does the stipulation reflect the current position of Direct Energy in this proceeding?
Yes.
I should have phrased it that way. Thank you.
Yes.
You heard Dominion Energy witnesses summarize their position, including Ms. Jackson, in their rebuttal testimony. And yet they've also signed the stipulation and in effect allowed that stipulation position to replace their pre-filed testimony. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And Direct Energy is in that same posture. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Drews. Any recross? Thank you. Mr. Miller, thank you for your testimony today. You may stand down.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Spear, is that complete?
Chair Belser, that completes our case. Thank you.
Or Mr. Drews? Thank you, Mr. Drews. Mr. Spears.
Thank you.
Now, Mr. Elliott. Thank you. Sorry I jumped the gun earlier.
That's all right. I'm ready when you are. Indulge me just a minute. My first witness is Robert Dodona. He is virtual.
Mr. Elliott, people can't hear you when you're not at a microphone.
Madam Chair, that might be
Regardless of
just
what
as well.
your wife may say.
Yeah. I will need a little help if I could get the cavalry to come down here and get my PowerPoint.
The way you want, right? You know.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, so you're there?
Yeah, can they see it up there?
Yeah, it's up.
All right, and so what?
She'll pull it up in a minute, but that's where you want to be.
All right, and so can I just advance it using this? Is it better use this?
Yes.
Which one's forward and which one's backwards?
Okay, forward, backward, left, and right.
Makes sense.
Forward.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You've called. This is Mr. Dodona?
Dodona, yes, ma'am.
Dodona. Good afternoon, Mr. Dodona.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm going to ask you to raise your right hand, and I'm going to administer the oath, please. Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Can we do a sound check? He sounds awfully low.
It would be helpful. I appreciate it.
Mr. Dodona, can you just tell me your name and where you're located for a sound check?
Sure. Robert Dodona, and my corporate office is out of Vienna, Virginia.
Okay. Can you get any closer to the microphone because you're awfully low? We can only boost so much here.
Sure thing. Is this any better?
That's a little better. Thank you very much.
Great, great.
Mr. Elliott.
And Madam Chair, just a question. I take it in a moment I'll be able to see Mr. Dodona and he'll be
Yes.
able to see me.
It just takes a little bit. They have to do some finagling back there So it needs to go for just a second before they can get it side by side.
All
There you
righty.
go.
And then I've got some PowerPoint, just his tables from his testimony. Will that be visible on the screen as well?
That's beyond my comprehension.
I think it will be, Mr. Dodona. All right, Mr. Dodona, would you please state and spell your name for the record?
Sure thing. It's Robert Didona. That's ROBERTDIDONA.
And Mr. Dodona, by whom are you employed?
I am the president and a principal of Energy Ventures Analysis, Inc., EVA for short. It's a energy consulting firm in Northern Virginia.
Very fine. And would you give the commission detail on your educational and employment experience?
Sure. So I have a bachelor's of business administration degree from Pace University, 2 decades of energy trading and asset management experience. I was employed by 2 different utility companies where my primary function was asset optimization strategies, which included working with power plant operators, being the bridging gap between the power plant and the commercial responsibilities, for finding the optimal strategy for the purpose of maximizing commercial results. I also worked in an investment bank where I was responsible for mitigating market risk for bank clients. In my current role as president of EVA, I manage the firm's power and natural gas consulting practices.
Excellent. Thank you.
Mr. Elliott, I'm going to have to ask you to speak into that microphone, please. We've got virtual folks that need to hear you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Now, Mr. Dodona, did you cause to be prepared and pre-filed with this commission 13 pages of direct testimony?
Yes.
Have you had an opportunity to read your testimony prior to your appearance here this afternoon?
Yes.
Do you have any corrections or changes to your direct testimony?
I do not.
If I asked you those same questions today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Very fine. Madam Chair, I would move Mr. Dodona's 13 pages of pre-filed direct testimony into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Dodona's pre-filed direct testimony will be entered into the record as if given from the stand.
Now, Mr. Dodona, did you also cause to be prepared and pre-filed one exhibit consisting of 3 pages labeled Resume of Robert Dodona?
Yes.
Do you have any changes or revisions to your exhibit?
I do not.
Madam Chair, I'd move Mr. Dodona's one exhibit into the record as the next hearing exhibit.
Mr. Dodona's exhibit that is labeled RD1 will be marked for identification as hearing exhibit 14 and received into the evidence of this case.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Dodona, would you please summarize your findings in this case?
Yeah, of course. So after analyzing data provided by the U.S. Energy Information Administration, the EIA, I made some basic observations regarding natural gas demand in South Carolina, the rising natural gas demand in South Carolina across the sectors that the data was provided in. It was aggregated into 5 sectors: residential, commercial, industrial, vehicle, and ELC, which is referred to as the electric generation, also known as power burns. For the purposes of my testimony, I did a lot of grouping of the 4 first categories and somewhat separating and isolating the electric demand sector. So I keep residential, commercial, industrial, and vehicle demand in one category, and then I look at the electric generation in a separate because for orders of magnitude. And while residential, commercial, industrial, and vehicular demand has been steadily rising, gas generation being sourced. So that what I mean when I say that is electric generator that is burning natural gas to make electricity. We refer to this in the business as power burns. Utilization gapped higher beginning in 2018. There's a few reasons for that, which I'm sure we're going to touch on shortly. But additionally, Dominion Energy South Carolina is proposing to modify its natural gas rate schedule by eliminating rate 35. It is my belief that Dominion Energy South Carolina is proposing to eliminate rate 35 so it can adequately control the rising and volatile nature of natural gas consumption at its gas-fired power plants. It's not clear to me that eliminating rate 35 or even modifying it in a sense would do anything to solve its gas demand issue at its power plants, nor would it do anything to improve service or reliability to its end users. My base of my discussion there is with regards to the removal of competitive forces there that would ultimately result in higher prices and potentially worse service to end users.
Very fine. Let me, if I may, draw your attention to Table 1 in your testimony found on page 3, and I have got a PowerPoint. There it is.
Yep.
Would you please explain Table 1, please?
Sure. So this is a table, and it's titled the Annual Average South Carolina Gas Demand by Sector. The data is represented in MMCFD. This means it's the total demand divided by 365 days to get a daily average read of what the demand is. What you'll notice is, again, annually by category, by sector. Residential, commercial, and IND, industrial vehicle, and then ELC for electric generation, you'll notice that there has been an upward trajectory in all of the demand sectors measured. However, the magnitude is the larger order here. Electric generation is up the most, with the exception of some odd readings from the vehicle sector. It's up 40%. And the change in 2015 relative to 2022 is the size of the residential and commercial demand represented in 2015, indicating that the growth that we've seen from the electric sector for natural gas is slightly larger than the total amount of residential and commercial customers that were consuming natural gas in the state of South Carolina during 2015. So that's a pretty big increase. And what I'd like to also point out in this chart is there's 7 years of data here, which has high demand, low demand, high prices, low prices, gas constraints, no gas constraints. And what I noticed here was beginning in 2018, and there's a reason for it, natural gas demand to the electric sector, you'll see, has remained relatively steady, but at an elevated level. And I started my analysis in 2015 because that was when we started to see a lot of the larger coal-fired generation retirements, not only in South Carolina, but across the country as well.
All right, thank you. Now, let me draw your attention, if I may, to tables 2 and 3 on page 5 of your testimony. I am showing table 2, so let's start with table 2. Please describe what table 2 reflects.
Sure. This is a line chart, and what it represents is Dominion Energy South Carolina natural gas demand by sector. So it's a different visual of the table rather than annualizing the data. I showed the data monthly, and the purpose for showing this was to illustrate the point that I was just trying to make, which effectively is residential, commercial, industrial demand, vehicle demand have a pretty stable and steady operating profile. While there has been some growth, it's very small when compared to what's happened in the electric sector. As you can see from the table there, there's a lot of peaks and valleys in natural gas generation, indicating that there's a lot of volatility, but you can somewhat see a linear upward trend to the overall burn, which is what we've seen in the data from that previous table. There's another major issue here, which is seasonality. Natural gas generation used to be just very popular in the summer months because we had coal generation to offset in the wintertime. Now, with the retirement of coal generation and the development of renewable resources like solar, that has not been the case so much. So you're not quite getting a double peak, but you're consuming a lot more natural gas in the wintertime as well at electric generation stations, whereas that was typically reserved for serving residential, commercial, and industrial customers.
How would you describe the usage, in particular for the industrial customer class, but also for the residential customer class?
Sure. So I'll start with industrial. Very flatlined. Obviously, there are some very small peaks and valleys in there, but very minor. I would consider them not really volatile. A little bit of weather sensitivities is built into that, meaning that when it gets very cold, the demand goes up. Whereas residential, you can see that blue line there. It does get residential gas demand is completely connected to weather. The colder weather gets, not in the wintertime, because in the summertime, because we don't run our heat in the summertime, but in the wintertime, we are directly correlating weather demand relative to residential gas burn, which again is a clear indicator, as you saw in the polar vortex, and sometime in winter 18, you can see that demand spike. But that's very anomalous and is generally directly connected to weather events.
Thank you. Now, drawing your attention to Table 3, please explain to the Commission what this table reflects.
Sure. So I added this one, which is the entire state of South Carolina. It represents the same data in general. Obviously, some of the numerator and denominators would change here on the shifts, but the important component here is while the shape remains virtually the same as what's going on in Dominion Energy South Carolina's footprint, what I think you're going to take away from here is the fact that the order of magnitude from what the DESC footprint is relative to the entire state. So there's a lot more than half the gas being consumed for power generation is coming from the DESC footprint. So that was why I decided to add this chart.
And that last point was, again, would you repeat it? I couldn't make it out.
Sure. So I added the state level chart, which is what you're seeing right here, as comparison. So if you were to go back to the other chart, you'd see that maybe here in the state of South Carolina, we topped out at 750 MMCFD, whereas if we went up to Table 2 and you looked at that top end demand in the winter 22 for Elliott, it was nearly 350 to 400. So it's a pretty sizable footprint for the electric generation demand relative to the state of South Carolina, whereas you can see that the same is not true for the industrial clients.
And so your point was, I think, between Table 3 and Table 2, that Dominion gas consumption for generation is about half of the total gas consumption for generation in the entire state of South Carolina?
That is correct, and even less for industrial.
Thank you.
Sure.
Let me draw your attention, if I may, to Table 4 of your testimony. Would you please explain to the Commission what Table 4 reflects?
Absolutely. So this is the data in this chart is represented in megawatts, and it's effectively installed capacity, which is the generation that was actually built in the state of South Carolina. We call it by technology and by fuel type. So you'll notice that gas has three separate identifiers, the three different technology, but they're all gas units. Basically, what the takeaway from this chart is based from 2010 through 2022. I grabbed as much data as I could find. This has been the ultimate change in generation installed in the state of South Carolina, meaning that if something new was built, the number would be going up. So the first line is gas CC, that's combined cycle. If you were to look at 2017, you'd see that we had 2.4 gigs. And then in 2018, we installed generation, which brought it up to 3 gigs, whereas coal started in 2010 at 6.1 gigs, and by 2022, it's under 4.8 gigs. So there was retirement. The only other line item here to point out is that there was no solar in the state of South Carolina in 2013, and now we have almost 1.2 gigs installed at the end of 2022. This is just a way for us to keep track of what was being built and retired in the state.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Let me now draw your attention to Table 5 of your testimony. Table 5 is found for the reader on page 10. What does Table 5 reflect?
This is the average generation total for both Columbia Energy Center and Jasper County, 2 gas units in the DESC service territory. Takeaways from this chart are, as you can see, Jasper County has been very consistent illustrated by that red line. A little bit of bouncing back and forth prior to 2015, but once we started to see those coal plant retirements, pretty steady. And the exact opposite happened for Columbia Energy Center. It wasn't very highly utilized until that 14 through 16 strip. We started to see more demand going to Columbia Energy Center by way of power burns because of the growing need for gas-fired generation utilization. So it has been quite a bit of a demand increase over the last few years. And then the second takeaway is everything beyond 2018, Columbia Energy Center and Jasper County have both been operating at very elevated levels over the last several years.
Can you use this table to calculate the total annual generation of the two units combined?
Absolutely. If you added the red line into the gray line, you can definitely do that.
What do you get?
Well, if we picked on 2022, we've got 7.5 to 8,000 gigawatt hours. Much different operating profile than what it was in 2010.
Now, I want to draw your attention to Table 6, but I do not have a copy of that to demonstrate here in the hearing room, but I would draw the reader's attention to page 11 of the pre-file testimony. Would you please describe Table 6 and Table 7?
Sure. So these are Table 6 is for Columbia Energy Center, Table 7 is for Jasper County. What you're seeing here are the daily scheduled quantities for each power plant, source provided by Carolina Gas Transmission Electronic Bulletin Board, the EBB. I added these charts beginning in 2018, largely because what I wanted to illustrate was the volatility associated with the gas generation. The burn profile at these power plants since 2018 has been a very elevated level, but it's not as simple as simply going out and saying, I'm going to procure gas on a monthly basis because of the dispatch profile. One day you might be operating at 0, the next day 100,000 for Columbia, and then right back to 0, and then up to 120,000. That's a lot of swing gas to have to move in and out of the pipeline and balance on a standard basis, especially considering the market is considered to be tight by the market in general. The same goes for Jasper County. You're seeing a lot of daily swings in Jasper County, despite the fact that it's operating at a high level. The daily volatility associated with electric dispatch, and remember too, some of this data is showing zeros here because the power plant has maintenance. Power plants do have maintenance outages. There could be outages on the gas pipeline that are limiting flows, but that's the total dispatch schedule. And if we again added up those two numbers, we're talking about nearly 300,000 decatherms of gas to manage these two facilities. So it's quite a bit of gas, and it's quite a bit of gas when compared to the rest of the state as well.
Thank you. Sure. Now, Mr. Dodona, would you please provide a summary of your findings and conclusions?
Yeah, absolutely. Dominion Energy South Carolina is concerned about maintaining adequate supplies to meet current demand. And not only the current demand, but also the forecasted demand, the expected growth that's coming. I did hear testimony that Dominion Energy South Carolina system is tight. The market knows it is tight. The prices reflect that it's tight, which again is concerning for most people inside of the state because there's concern about the ongoing development. There's more gas power plants coming. And also in conclusion, I fail to see how the elimination of rate 35 will benefit end users, which will effectively eliminate market forces to compete to deliver low-price gas. And not only that, but if rate 35 is eliminated, I fail to see how reliability or service would be improved despite the higher price points.
Very fine. Mr. Dodona, thank you so much. Please answer any questions anybody in the room may have.
Absolutely.
Appreciate your time. Madam Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. CMC Steel, you want to go first? Okay. We'll start with Dominion Energy. Go ahead. Turn the mic on.
That's okay. Good afternoon, Mr. DeDona.
Good afternoon.
How are you? My name is Chad Burgess. I'm in-house corporate counsel for Dominion Energy South Carolina. We've never had the chance to meet before, have we?
We have not.
Yeah, so it's
Nice to
nice.
meet you.
It's nice to meet you, sir. Good to see you virtually. I just have a couple questions, and I just want to be clear with the commission with regarding on whose behalf you're testifying to before today. And I understand that you're testifying on behalf of both Texacan and the South Carolina Energy Users Committee. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And I presume, Mr. DeDona, that the South Carolina Energy Users Committee hired you for your consulting services. Is that correct?
For this engagement, yes.
And as part of your engagement for this docket, I presume that you reviewed the application that Dominion Energy South Carolina submitted to this commission. Is that correct?
I did not. I reviewed a brief summary. I did not review the actual application.
Just so I'm clear, Mr. DeDona, you did not review the company's application that it filed on March 31st in this case?
I don't believe I did.
Okay. And why did you not review that application, Mr. DeDona?
Sir, I was asked to provide testimony regarding the state of South Carolina and Dominion Energy South Carolina with regards to their natural gas consumption.
And but your testimony was not based upon a review of the company's application in this proceeding.
No, it is not. I did not review that document.
Okay. Are you aware? Well, let me ask this: is it true that you, in fact, read the testimony of the company that it filed in this docket?
No, I did not.
You did not read the testimony of witness Rose Jackson. Is that correct?
Oh, my apologies. I did not understand your question. I did read some of the testimony that specifically that mentioned my name.
Okay, so
I read Ms. Jackson's testimony.
Okay, you just so we're clear with the commission, you did in fact read Ms. Jackson's pre-filed direct testimony, correct?
I did.
Okay. Did you read DESC witness Jennifer Nelson's direct testimony?
No.
Did you read DESC witness Michael Phibbs's direct testimony?
No.
Did you read the pre-filed direct testimony of Russell Harris?
No.
Did you read the pre-filed direct testimony of Regina Elbert?
No.
Which pre-filed testimony that the company filed in this docket did you read, Mr. DeDona, other than Ms. Jackson?
Ms. Jackson's.
Okay.
Ms. Jackson's was the testimony that I read.
Okay. Are you aware that there was a stipulation filed in this docket?
I was aware. I do not have the details.
Okay, so it's correct, Mr. DeDona, that you have not read the stipulation in this docket?
That is correct.
Okay. Is it correct, Mr. DeDona, that on behalf of the energy users, you did not include in your direct testimony any issue with the company's proposed ROE?
No, sir.
And is it also true, Mr. DeDona, that you did not include any discussion in your pre-filed direct testimony, anything regarding to the company's capital structure?
That is correct.
And is it also true, Mr. DeDona, that in your pre-filed testimony you did not include any testimony related to the company's pro forma adjustments?
That is correct.
And is it your testimony today that you continue to not take issue with the ROE, the capital structure, or the pro forma adjustments that were stipulated by the parties in the stipulation agreement?
I don't know exactly how to answer that question, sir. My testimony is here. I'm testifying on behalf of my clients to help explain the gas fundamental and power fundamental components within the state of South Carolina, and more specifically inside of Dominion Energy South Carolina's footprint.
Right. And because you didn't read the application in this docket, Mr. DeDona, is it your testimony that you don't understand that there are other issues present in this docket?
Yes, I suppose that's the answer.
All right, no further questions. Thank you, Mr. DeDona.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. CMC Steele.
No questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
Direct Energy Business Marketing,
No questions, thank you.
Texarkana, that's their witness, Scana Energy Marketing, LLC.
No questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Department of Consumer Affairs,
No questions, thank you.
Office of Regulatory Staff.
No questions, Madam Chair.
Commissioners. Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you. So, Mr. Dodona, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Thank you. So, basically, I think what I understand is that you are generally recommending that the rate 35 and related rates should stay the same. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And so I'm looking at your direct testimony on page 13. That's page 13 up in the top left corner. And lines 8 through 11 talks about the growing need to deliver gas to electric generators, and that the impact not only them but current and future end users, and the over-reliance on natural gas will eventually result in the need to limit the delivery of natural gas to all other customer classes. So I guess basically, given that statement, how would keeping things the same eliminate that problem? Excuse me.
So it doesn't on rate 35. What I was specifically referring to there was the energy market fundamentals. What I'm mainly concerned with was if there were to be the elimination of rate 35, there could be a designation of where gas could flow without energy marketers actually scheduling and nominating gas to the specific clients that they were serving. Again, there's infrastructure, there's a tight market condition, and there's infrastructure that is needed to be expanded upon inside of this service territory. And the growing concerns that we get more housing starts, we get some industrial demand growth, and we build new gas-fired generation, that would ultimately create a problem with deliverability in the future.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me, that's all I had.
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. Commissioner Caston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And good afternoon, Mr. Diodona.
Good afternoon.
So, as I understand it, from the recent question, your only focus, or maybe not only, but primary focus, was particularly on, I guess, gas demands, fluctuations of Dominion, and the state as a whole. Is that generally correct?
That is correct. It's regarding energy market fundamentals.
And I did find your graphs and plots very, very interesting. I want to make sure that I understood them all.
Sure.
Well, not all, but let's kind of go through quickly. Dominion, basically, the gas demand or gas used for electric generation, Dominion's consumption is approximately 50% of the total used in the state for electric generation. Is that correct?
Yes, that is what we've observed very recently.
And looking at those graphs or those plots, did I understand you to say is the primary reason for that, in your opinion, not only with Dominion, but in the state as a whole, is the primary reason for that because of the reduction in generation capability because of, I guess, coal retirement and the increase in solar PV, variable solar PV coming onto the system?
Yes, and the last leg of that to finish your thought there would be because of the retirements and the increased renewable penetration, we are finding that we need to have a higher call on natural gas generation to serve as the fast-acting fossil swing fuel to ensure electric reliability.
And to me, it's going to sound redundant, but those graphs were very graphic to me. And I've heard similar things repeatedly in other hearings. And since you did read Ms. Jackson's testimony, well, to be honest, if you at least listen to the questions this morning, the question and answers, the concern relative to obviously being able to get the gas supply, pipelines, enough capacity in pipelines. Do you see that as a significant concern, not only with Dominion, but in the state as a whole?
There are, so I operate some models internally in order to make my projections, and we do see rent payments kicking up as in constraint points for gas flows that do come into the DESC service territory and into South Carolina. But as we discussed, there is still gas available to be able to be purchased. Even though the price goes high, it doesn't necessarily mean that the gas is not flowing. For the obvious reasons, otherwise people would be running out of gas pretty often. It's just that we're getting constraint pricing from where we expected those basis differentials to come into, indicating that the prices have to rise in order to meet the demand inside of the state as well as inside DESC's footprint. And I think some of the testimony I heard again was about, you know, a 1,000 MMBTU delivery of customers that were getting curtailed. But the reality is there's 300,000 decatherms of gas to balance on a swing basis inside of this system on a daily basis, which is much more my area of expertise.
That was a lot to digest, but I think I followed some of it. Let me ask it this way, and here's what I'm trying to get to. Here's what I want to understand in my concern. Because of these things we just talked about, retirement of coal facilities, increased variable solar, there's going to be a demand. We're going to need to replace coal retirement, and we're going to need to accommodate, by some way, variable solar generation during non-generation times, correct?
Correct.
And it seems to be very, very variable and growing at a very good rate. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And I'm repeatedly hearing that there are restraints on being able to get the gas throughout the system via transmission, I guess, intrastate and interstate. Is that a true statement?
Yes and no. It's not always a true statement, sir, and I apologize if I'm not being 1,000% clear, but we think about things in two phrases here, and in seasonality, it's winter and summer. For the summer months, the constraints are not that bad because the residential demand is not as high. The commercial demand is also lower, but in the winter time, we could have more issues there as well. And that's with the current grid, right, without further expansion.
Okay. Well, that I understand, and I guess that's what individually, and I guess as a commission, we need to understand too, that okay, there's this rising demand, there's this dwindling ability to satisfy that demand,
Yes, that is correct.
So, well,
I mean, that's a true statement.
so I guess there needs to be an answer to how best to accommodate that. Not that you have that answer, but do you agree that we probably need to answer this question sooner than later?
Without a doubt. I completely agree.
That's all I needed. Thank you. No more questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Caston. Commissioner Carolee Williams?
Thank you, Chair Belzer. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Did you listen to the testimony from yesterday?
I listened. I was not around for the entire day, but I listened to some parts of Ms. Jackson's testimony.
Okay. I think it was Ms. Jackson who I had a conversation with about, but it actually could have been another company witness about North Carolina. Are you familiar with supply or rates like rate 35 and whether they're involved in the North Carolina territory of Dominion?
I did hear you ask that question, and no, I am not an expert in that. I
Okay.
purely gas fundamentals. I think that question led into a Mountain Valley Pipeline type discussion, which I'd be happy to comment on, but not regarding rates in North Carolina.
Okay. Well, I think as I recall, it had more to do with the rate structure in North Carolina and the ability to meet demand. And maybe, so I'm holding you off on that offer for just a second while I process my thoughts. But sure, I'll let you, Mountain Valley Pipeline, what do you want to tell me about it?
So yeah, so Mountain Valley Pipeline has probably been the bane of existence for Eastern gas traders and operators. It's 2 BCFD of gas that's coming out of the Appalachia that's supposed to serve the Carolinas. And I do think it will provide some support off the Transco system to connect to, the state of South Carolina, but I'm not exactly sure we're going to see a whole lot of new excess supply dropping in. I think North Carolina, I think Virginia, I think you're going to see some other areas regionally that are going to consume some of that gas as well. So South Carolina is going to have to do an awful lot to procure and build some infrastructure to make sure that they can not only source supply, but also transport that supply to where it needs to go.
Just to clarify and to go back to your testimony, tell me if this is correct or not. I think you've testified that Jasper and Columbia came online in around 2018.
Not exactly. No, those
Okay.
plants were operating. Their operating profile picked up. And not so much Jasper, but Columbia's operating profile picked up significantly in 2018.
I'm sorry, Jasper or Columbia's?
Oh, my apologies. Columbia Energy Center's operating profile picked up significantly in 2018 and really hasn't turned back.
And Jasper?
Jasper's been pretty steady across all the years that we analyzed, but at elevated levels.
Well, what I noticed is that your chart starts in June of 2018, and so I guess my question is, why did the chart start in June of 2018?
Sure, great question. So that was the data that we had. We couldn't get before June of 2018, but that just so happens to coincide with when the usage started to skyrocket. So even with that high consumption overall, even though we're seeing that the annual generation data is very strong, you're still seeing a lot of variability with the operations on a day-to-day basis. As you can see, you'll look through the Columbia Energy Center and the Jasper County operating profile, and we go from 0 to 100,000+ MMBTUs over the course of a few days, up and down and up and down. What's not shown in this data is the hourly profile. When you buy 1,000 decatherms of gas for a day, you're supposed to ratably take 1,000 decatherms for every hour to get 24,000 decatherms by the end. That's not how gas plants pull all the time. All gas plants generally don't operate during the evenings, or they run at very low levels during the evenings or the off-peak. And then during the day, when demand is the highest, they generally operate very high and they take more gas than what was being scheduled to the pipe for that specific hour. So there's a lot of variance that goes into those annual levels, and that was the purpose of showing these daily charts.
Well, then, I think I was trying to understand those in relationship to Table 1. So remind me what it is, because I could see the relationship when I look at particularly looked at the res numbers and the ELC numbers, and just big changes in around 2018 and the relationship of those two. Remind me what it was that happened in 2018 that began to, that was the reason for some of those changes.
Sure. So in Table 4, we start to see
no, I said Table 1, just for clarification. Okay.
Yep, absolutely. The driving force behind it is the install base, and then we're going to get into the second part.
Okay.
You see gas generation started to increase around 2018, and the coal was already offline from 2015. So there was not a whole lot of operating benefit. We pretty much switched, 1.5 gigawatts to nearly 2 gigawatts of supply between coal and gas. So that resulted in a much higher utilization profile starting in 2018 for gas inside of the state of South Carolina. And if you notice one other item in the residential, as you go from 2018 to 2020, the demand drops and then it picks right back up as we start to get out of that COVID lockdown phase in 2020. Whereas on the electric sector, it never really changed, right? It's very highly utilized, and it's dispatching at very high levels, regardless of whether it's high demand, low prices, or high prices. Summer 22, we saw some of the highest gas prices we've seen for a very long time, and they were sustained for the majority of the summer. That didn't really do a whole lot to impact gas generation at these facilities.
Thank you. I heard it the first time, but I needed to hear it the second time. I appreciate it. No further questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioners, further questions for this witness? Hearing none. Mr. Elliott? Thank you, Mr. Elliott. I'm sorry. You had more questions?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I'm not sure that he can answer it, but I want to ask it. Mr. Dodona, how does DESC's proposed tariffs deprive large consumers from firm supply?
It doesn't. It doesn't at all. Not from what I see, but that's my answer for right now. I don't see it limiting.
And why should the utility be required to provide a backup service if a customer chooses to be on an interruptible tariff?
Well, I think it's important for reliability.
That a customer should be required to have a backup service?
Yes, absolutely. Things happen in the grid very quickly, and we don't want to see those rolling blackouts or people not having heat at their homes.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Elliott. Mr. Dodona, thank you for your testimony today. We appreciate you being with us, and you may stand down.
Thank you.
Mr. Elliott. We're going to probably end up finishing about 5 today. We're going to need to finish. You're going to be able let's just go ahead. Do you need a break? Okay. Let's just go.
Mr. Gray, if you'd raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Madam Chair, could I get a little help from the staff? I'm showing these tables up here on the screen, and I would...
From the prior witness?
Yes, ma'am. I just want them off. I've turned the monitor off. Y'all have to come back and fix it when I leave. All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Gray, would you please state and spell your name for the record?
Robert Gray, Robertgray.
And Mr. Gray, by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm the general manager for South Carolina for Texaco Natural Gas Company.
And would you please summarize your educational background and your work experience?
Yes, I earned a Bachelor of Science in Commerce with a second major in mathematics from the University of Virginia in 2004. I earned a Master of Business Administration from Harvard Business School in 2010. I joined Texaco 10 years ago and built the company's South Carolina business, providing pipeline capacity, physical natural gas commodity, and financial hedging products to dozens of customers throughout the state. Prior to Texaco, I was Chief Financial Officer of a 180-employee manufacturing business, and before that, I worked in the mergers and acquisitions industry in private equity and investment banking roles.
Very fine. Thank you. Now, Mr. Gray, did you cause to be prepared and pre-filed in this docket 16 pages of direct testimony?
I did.
And have you had an opportunity to review your testimony prior to the hearing this afternoon?
I have.
Do you have any corrections or changes or revisions to your pre-filed direct testimony?
I do not.
If I asked you those same questions today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Madam Chair, I'd move the pre-filed direct testimony of Robert C. Gray into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Gray's pre-filed direct testimony will be entered into the record as if given from the stand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Gray, did you cause to be prepared and pre-filed with this commission 6 pages of surrebuttal testimony?
Yes, I did.
Have you had an opportunity to reread your surrebuttal testimony prior to your appearance here this afternoon?
Yes, I have.
Do you have any corrections or changes or revisions to your surrebuttal testimony?
No, I do not.
If I asked you those same questions this afternoon, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Madam Chair, I would move Mr. Gray's surrebuttal testimony into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Gray's pre-filed surrebuttal testimony will be entered into the record as if given from the stand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Gray, would you please explain Dominion's rate request in this docket?
Yes. For industrial customers that receive non-interruptible supply, DESC is proposing to abolish Rate 35 and Rate 35A. Many industrial customers are currently on Rate 35 or Rate 35A. And those structures allow an industrial customer to hire a marketer to bring natural gas to DESC system while providing a backup to these customers with utility system supply.
All right. Do industrial customers pay for this backup or what I think you call standby service?
Yes. Industrial customers on these rates have been paying demand charges for at least 20 years, perhaps a quarter century. They've been paying for this service.
So the industrial customers pay a demand charge, a charge for this standby service?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Gray, has Dominion expressed an intent to build more natural gas power plants here in South Carolina?
Yes, they have. Their integrated resource plan filed January 30th of this current year, 2023, proposes a plant in the Low Country that would generate 662 megawatts for DESC and a roughly equal amount for its partner Santee Cooper. This proposed plant, presently dubbed the Shared Resource, would likely consume more than 200,000 decatherms of natural gas per day, and that volume was confirmed by witnesses yesterday.
Very fine. Does Dominion have plans for even additional gas generation?
They do. The same integrated resource plan states that the Coke Station plant, with capacity of 415 megawatts, will be natural gas only by 2031.
All right, and we heard some testimony a moment ago from Mr. Dodona about coal plant retirements. What does Dominion propose with respect to retiring coal-only plants?
On page 56 of this year's integrated resource plan, DESC stated that they remain committed to retiring coal-only units by the end of 2030, but decided for planning purposes to assume that Coke remains dual fuel capable until 2031.
Thank you. Now, let's talk about natural gas supply. First, would additional natural gas supply from Elba Island and the Savannah area be able to reach these proposed power plants, the shared resources plant and the Coke plant?
Yes, as we've discussed, Carolina Gas Transmission is the pipeline that brings gas from the perimeter of the state deeper into the state. So to address your question, we're really talking about Carolina Gas Transmission and the ability of that pipeline to bring gas from the Savannah area northward into the heart of the state. And at this point, additional natural gas capacity would be possible only with significant upgrades to CGT. And the reason for that is that there's a physical limitation, a bottleneck, if you will, at the Jasper plant that prevents more than 62,000 decatherms per day from flowing further north into the state.
Thank you. Would additional natural gas supply from Transco be able to reach these proposed power plants, the shared resources plant and the Coke plant?
It's unlikely that Transco supply could reach them without significant upgrades to the Carolina Gas Transmission system. And the reason for that, you have to get into the pipeline hydraulics and realize that where Transco gas comes in the north of the state, that gas must traverse a real hairpin turn in Aiken to get to the low country. And the problem with traversing that hairpin turn is that it creates high pressure on the pipe at that point, which makes bringing additional supply in through Southern Natural Gas Pipeline into Aiken very difficult because you're trying to put gas into a already highly pressurized pipe.
Very fine. Thank you. Would additional natural gas supply from SONAT reach these proposed power plants?
Again, only with some upgrades to the Carolina Gas Transmission system. This could be less intrusive than from the other points that we mentioned. Perhaps this could even be done with additional compression, but I'm not a pipeline engineer in that sense. But yes, with some upgrades to the CGT system.
Now, were you aware whether Dominion had requested more capacity from Southern Natural Gas or to supply these proposed plants?
I have not seen written evidence of a request.
Again, I ask you now, could the growth in gas-fired generation combined with this shortage of pipeline capacity be what is motivating Dominion to propose reallocating capacity used to serve industrials on rate 35 for use in Dominion's own power generation?
The majority of growth in natural gas consumption over the last 5 years has been to fuel power generation. Within DESC's generation stack, both Columbia Energy Center and Jasper Generating Plant have increased their annual power output. Eliminating rates 35 and 35A will hinder industrial customers while benefiting DESC's own power plants. The proposed reallocation of capacity from industrial users to power generation, however, is not likely to provide enough natural gas to fuel COPE, let alone the proposed shared resource. DESC requesting to expand the Southern Natural Gas Pipeline would have a tremendous positive economic impact on the state of South Carolina, while DESC requesting to eliminate rate 35 and rate 35A will not.
Thank you. Please describe rate 35 in a little more detail.
Yes. DESC has historically offered competitive gas rates, which permit the market to drive down the cost of natural gas to South Carolina industrial customers. Rate 35 and 35A have successfully encouraged economic development by harnessing competitive market forces while assuring industrials that they will have the energy they need to manufacture products and create jobs. Rate 35 and 35A have proven to be effective tools to attract new industry and retain existing industry and their employees. DESC now proposes to eliminate these rates. Rate 35 and 35A provide rate structures that allow an industrial customer to obtain its own natural gas, relying on either its own staff or by employment of a marketer to bring natural gas from the wellhead to DESC's system. Under these rates, DESC provides a backup to these customers with utility system supply if an independent natural gas supply does not arrive. Industrial customers pay for this backstop through a demand charge on the utility invoice.
Now, in what way does rate 36 differ from the existing rate 35?
So rate 36 does not have a standby service component. So an industrial customer or its supplier is required to deliver all the necessary natural gas molecules to the DESC city gate. For an industrial customer supply to reach the relevant DESC city gate every day without fail, the customer or its supplier would require firm capacity on Carolina gas transmission that reaches the specific geographic DESC city gate for that customer.
Would an industrial customer have difficulties acquiring Carolina gas transmission capacity that reaches DESC's city gate?
Yes. When South Carolina Pipeline split into a state-regulated utility, now known as DESC, and a FERC-regulated pipeline, now known as Carolina Gas Transmission, the utility controlled the majority of the firm capacity on the pipeline and still continues to do so. For example, there is currently firm Carolina Gas Transmission capacity of 126,387 decatherms per day to the DESC Charleston point, and DESC controls all 126,387 decatherms per day. The same situation exists for Aiken, Allendale, Cheraw, Columbia, Florence, Georgetown, and Sumter.
Would you, there's a chart in your testimony at page 12. Would you please explain to the Commission how this chart demonstrates your testimony of a moment ago?
Yes. So across the top, these are the non-geographic area points on where DESC receives gas to redeliver to customers. And you can see that at all points except for one, DESC owns all of the CGT capacity to that point. The source for this data is the Carolina Gas Transmission customer list, dated April 1st of 2023. And for clarity in the second column, I've added the contract number to which I'm referring.
Good. Thank you. Please continue your answer.
Carolina Gas Transmission is fully subscribed, so there is not presently an opportunity for other industrial customers or their shippers to permanently acquire firm capacity that reaches the DESC city gates. DESC's status as the sole capacity holder to these points, along with DESC's historical unwillingness to release non-recallable capacity, makes it impossible for an industrial customer or its marketer to guarantee firm service for that industrial customer. This is because Carolina Gas Transmission, in its sole discretion, may choose not to schedule natural gas supply to non-primary points serving industrial customers.
All right, and just for clarity, you use the term non-recallable capacity. Would you please explain to the Commission what that term means?
Yes, this is getting very, very inside baseball for the natural gas business. But what this means is that a shipper may release their Carolina Gas Transmission to another shipper in either a recallable or non-recallable form. Non-recallable means that the replacement shipper is guaranteed to have access to that capacity for the duration of the release. Recallable capacity would mean, in this case, DESC would issue a recallable release to an industrial or their marketer, but then on a peak day, DESC could take that capacity back for their own needs.
All right, thank you for that clarification. If an industrial customer loses the benefit of rate 35 or 35A, what alternatives would it have to secure natural gas?
Yes, rate 34 may be available to customers, but DESC is not guaranteeing that it will be available to all. Rate 34 has historically cost approximately $5 per decatherm more than rate 35 when that customer uses a third-party supplier to bring in that supply. So if rate 34 is even available, this choice would likely be far more expensive than rate 35 using a marketer. Rate 36 would be available to all customers on rate 35 or rate 35A. For an industrial customer to receive firm service on rate 36, the industrial would need access to firm Carolina gas transmission capacity with a contractual delivery point of the geographic DESC city gate where the industrial is located. DESC controls 99.96% of the CGT capacity, and DESC's filings have not guaranteed the ability to release this capacity for industrial customers. Another alternative would be to choose an interruptible service, such as rate 54 or 55, then find a way to curtail usage when DESC curtails access to natural gas. This could be accomplished in some applications through the use of alternate fuels, such as oil or propane. The effect of all of these alternatives is increased costs or complexity.
Thank you. Now let's turn your attention, please, to your surrebuttal testimony. Now, Mr. Gray, Ms. Jackson states on page 5 of her rebuttal testimony that Dominion is not aware of any other LDC that offers a similar service to that of rate 35. Are we forced to conclude that this commission should permit Dominion to discontinue to offer rate 35?
No, we're not. South Carolina is not the same as every other state, and that South Carolina has enjoyed tremendous success attracting advanced manufacturing facilities and the tens of thousands of associated jobs. Rate 35 is an innovative structure that blends a competitive marketplace with a utility backstop. The continuation of these rates is in the public interest as it has fostered industrial development, economic prosperity, job growth, and a rising tax base in the state.
Thank you. Now, Ms. Jackson suggests that Dominion's industrial customers may have the opportunity to contract with interstate pipelines for natural gas. Do you agree with Ms. Jackson's discussion of pipeline capacity on page 13 of her rebuttal testimony?
Well, everything that Ms. Jackson states on page 13 is technically correct. The statement fails to recognize the limitations with which DESC's industrial customers operate. Natural gas capacity on interstate pipelines serving South Carolina is constrained, and expansion opportunities for industrial customers are limited. Ms. Jackson's testimony fails to inform the Commission that DESC owns 99.96% of the existing firm capacity that reaches DESC city gates on the Carolina gas transmission pipeline. DESC's representations to the Commission so far fail to ensure that customers availing themselves of the competitive market will have access to this Carolina gas transmission capacity. Furthermore, future upstream capacity additions, such as those Ms. Jackson references, will undoubtedly take more than 1 year or even the 18-month runway we've discussed to construct, thereby depriving industrial customers time to subscribe to new capacity, while DESC monopolizes the Carolina gas transmission capacity currently used to serve rates 35 and 35A.
All right, Mr. Gray, is there a need for new incremental interstate pipeline capacity to serve South Carolina?
Yes, absolutely. And I was perplexed by Ms. Jackson's written testimony that failed to accept the fact that natural gas pipelines into South Carolina are severely constrained. Governor Henry McMaster recognized the sense of urgency to take all measures to ensure that the state will have access to adequate supply of diverse sources of affordable energy resources in Executive Order 2023-18. On page 10 of her rebuttal testimony, Ms. Jackson seems to suggest that natural gas pipeline constraints are a mere possibility. DESC fails to demonstrate a sense of urgency for the need to increase natural gas capacity, not only for electric generation, but also for its customers' consumption. It's common knowledge that DESC was perilously close to rolling blackouts on December 24th of last year due to a lack of natural gas availability, and it's disingenuous for Ms. Jackson to not recognize this reality. DESC and its predecessors placed their eggs in the nuclear basket a decade ago. Since the VC Summer project was officially abandoned 6 years ago, DESC has had adequate time to add upstream pipeline capacity to enable continued industrial growth in DESC service territory. Regrettably, we have reached a point where the utility feels it is no longer able to guarantee non-interruptible supply to its existing customers, as well as economic development prospects, and is therefore threatening the continued prosperity of South Carolinians.
Now, Ms. Jackson testifies on page 5 of her rebuttal testimony that Rate 35 customers do not pay a demand charge for standby service during the summer months of May through October, and therefore are not paying their full cost associated with such service. Would you like to comment on that?
Yes. Here, other than Ms. Jackson's conclusory statements, DESC does not attempt to demonstrate the need for a summer demand charge, nor does the record demonstrate factual basis for establishing a summer demand charge. Assuming for the sake of argument that DESC is able to demonstrate the need for a summer demand charge, Rate 35 with a reasonable cost-based summer demand charge would still give DESC's existing industrial customers a competitive rate and give DESC an economic advantage over other local distribution companies. Amending the forward-looking Rate 35 by adding a reasonable summer demand charge, which allows DESC to recover its costs, is more beneficial than replacing Rate 35 with the proposed Rate 36. The public interest compels denying DESC's request to replace Rate 35 with Rate 36 in this docket.
All right, thank you. Turning our attention to Ms. Smith's testimony, on page 17 of her rebuttal testimony, Ms. Smith stated that Rate 34 results in a lower bill for customers than does Rate 35. Do you believe the customer would agree with her assessment?
No, I serve many customers on Rate 35, and they would not agree with that assessment. These customers hire a marketer to supply their commodity at a far lower cost than the commodity rate offered by DESC on Rate 35. So that is, these customers on Rate 35 use competitive forces to drive down the commodity costs rather than buy that commodity from the utility.
Do you have any final comments to make in this matter?
Yes. In some, Rates 35 and 35A are unique structures that have been tremendously beneficial to the prosperity of South Carolina, and should remain in place. Governor McMaster's Executive Order 2023-18 mandates action to address the existing limitations on the state's ability to receive and capability to utilize natural gas. DESC's proposal to eliminate Rates 35 and 35A and monopolize that Carolina gas transmission capacity without providing sufficient time for industrial customers to acquire similar capacity is contrary to the governor's mandate.
Let me ask you this. If Dominion should leave Rate 35 and 35A intact for commercial customers, how would that benefit the customers over as opposed to requiring them to take service on 34?
So the cost would be much lower on Rate 35 would be the primary benefit.
Well, does forcing these customers to Rate 34 free up capacity?
It would not free up capacity in that DESC would use all of the upstream capacity currently used for Rate 35 to serve these customers on Rate 34. So if these Rate 35 customers were essentially forced over to Rate 34 as the only truly firm option, then that would not free up capacity.
Does forcing industrial customers to Rate 34 threaten competitiveness?
Absolutely. Rate 34 compared to similar rates in other states, including Dominion Energy North Carolina's territory. Rate 34 is analogous to Rate 145 on Dominion Energy North Carolina, and the comparable cost for a medium-sized customer burning 10,000 decatherms a month, about 400 decatherms a day. DESC's proposed Rate 34 in their filing, in their March 31st filing, would be $123,000 per month, while DENC Rate 145 at the current rate would be $52,000. So there would, the DESC Rate 34 would be more than twice the cost of another utility owned by the same parent company, one state north of here.
And does forcing existing industrial customers off their competitively priced, non-interruptible supply consistent with Governor McMaster's order?
I do not believe it would be consistent with his order or with, yes, it would certainly not be consistent with his order.
Very fine. All right, Mr. Gray, thank you very much. Answer any questions. Mr. Burgess may have some for you, and perhaps the commission, but thank you so much for your testimony.
Dominion, Mr. Burgess.
Good afternoon, Mr. Gray. How are you doing?
Excellent. Thank you, Mr.
I'm
Burgess.
Chad Burgess. We've met before. You know me. I know you. It's good to see you again today.
Great to see you.
Chair Belzer, is this Elmo working? I'd like to take advantage of it if I may.
I understand that it is.
All right, very good. So while I'm looking through my notes, Mr. Gray, I just want to be clear with the commission on who you're testifying on behalf of today. Isn't it true that you're testifying on behalf of Texacan, correct?
I'm also testifying on behalf of the South Carolina Energy Users Committee.
Okay, so both Energy Users Committee and Texacan. All right,
Correct.
perfect. All right. Now, do you recall coming before this commission on July the 10th and participating in an allowable ex parte communication briefing?
I do.
And you do understand when you participate in an allowable ex parte communication briefing, you're not sworn in as a witness. You understand that, correct?
Correct.
But you have been sworn in as a witness here today, correct?
Correct.
And I'm not suggesting that you've said anything untruthful in the ex parte briefing. I'm just pointing out that you weren't under oath at that point in time, correct?
That's my recollection.
Okay. So anything you said in the ex parte briefing, is it safe to say that that was truthful and correct?
I believe so.
Okay. So I've got here a transcript or a portion of the transcript of some of your testimony from that allowable ex parte briefing, and you've spoken a lot about Governor McMaster's executive order, correct?
Yes.
All right. So would you mind reading, let's start here on line 15, and I'm going to get you to read where it begins, the governor's order, and then roll it all the way down to the end of the page, and I'll turn the page over.
The governor's order. I was very enthused. I was at the press conference where he released the order, and industry has clearly had a transformative role for this state between Boeing, Michelin, BMW, the supply chains that have come along with those large industrials, and the tens of thousands of jobs those have created. And so the governor's executive order recognized that historically. And also we've seen so many economic development announcements here over the last couple of years, whether it's solar, whether it's electric.
I'm going to flip the page over for you. And if you'll read through line 4.
Vehicles, whether it's conventional vehicles, as the governor likes to say, he mandates coordination, collaboration, and cooperation to prepare for these times.
And that statement you made back in July, Mr. Gray, you believe that statement to be true, that he being the governor, mandates coordination, collaboration, and cooperation to prepare for these times?
He has used those words.
Okay, very good. Well, this is your testimony. I want to make sure that that's correct. You believe that, correct?
Yes, I believe he said that.
Okay,
yes.
all right. So he, the governor, mandates coordination, cooperation, and collaboration. I want to ask you about the stipulation that you did not enter into, that the other parties did. Isn't it true, Mr. Gray, that the stipulation contains a provision that addresses return on equity?
Yes, it does.
And isn't it true in your testimony you do not take an issue with return on equity?
That's correct.
And in the stipulation, it also maintains a provision that relates to the capital structure. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And isn't it true that in your testimony on behalf of Texacan and the Energy Users Committee, you do not take issue with capital structure?
That's correct.
And likewise, you do not take issue with any of the pro forma adjustments that have been in your testimony either. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And is it true, Mr. Gray, that you do not take any issue with ROE, capital structure, or the pro forma adjustments that are set forth in the stipulation today?
Correct.
Okay. Now, I want to talk with you a little bit about the relationship between Texacan and the Energy Users Committee. Now, isn't it true, Mr. Gray, that Texacan is not a wholly owned subsidiary of the energy users?
No, it is. We are not a wholly owned subsidiary of the energy users.
That's right. And likewise, it is also true that the energy users is not a wholly owned subsidiary of Texacan, correct?
Correct.
And in fact, isn't it true that the energy users consist of large industrial energy users? Is that true?
That is true.
And isn't it true that Texacan is not a large industrial consumer of energy, which engages in various manufacturing enterprises in South Carolina? Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
In fact, Texacan is not even a small consumer of natural gas from Dominion Energy. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Burgess.
And in fact, Texacan doesn't even have any offices in South Carolina. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And according to your testimony, you indicated that Texacan is a limited liability company. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And as a limited liability company, I presume you're organized under the laws of some state. Do you know what state that is?
Texas.
Okay, so you're organized under the laws of the state of Texas. Isn't it true that Texacan is not registered with the South Carolina Secretary of State to do business in South Carolina?
I'm not familiar with that.
You're the general manager of Texacan, correct?
I'm not the general manager of Texacan.
I'm sorry. Would you mind telling me what your job duties are? You're the general manager of what? I thought you said you were the general manager of Texacan.
I run our South Carolina business.
Okay, and that's right. You built the South Carolina business.
Correct.
But you're not aware that you're not authorized to do business in South Carolina. Is that your testimony?
That is correct.
Okay. Now, Mr. Gray, how many of Texacan's customers are located in South Carolina?
Approximately 60.
And of that amount, how many are located in Dominion Energy's service territory?
Approximately 45.
And of that amount, how many are members of the South Carolina Energy Users Committee?
One that I'm aware of.
Okay. And which one is that?
I would prefer not to disclose my customer list if that's not mandated by the commission.
You do recognize that your one customer has a contract with Dominion Energy South Carolina?
Yes.
And you do recognize and know that that contract's on file with the commission and is publicly available for viewing?
Yes.
And you do recognize that that customer is one of Dominion Energy's South Carolina's customers?
Yes.
Okay. Now, Texacan, you said earlier, you're not a member of the Energy Users Committee. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And that's because Texacan doesn't take electricity or natural gas from Dominion Energy South Carolina.
That's correct.
That's right. In fact, they're separate entities like you've already described below or earlier, correct?
Yes.
But at some point, Texacan and the Energy Users Committee got together to decide to have you serve as a witness in this proceeding, correct?
Yes.
And is it logical to conclude that because you're testifying on behalf of the energy users that you have some semblance of the way they're structured and are formulated as a committee?
I don't understand the question.
Do you understand how the South Carolina Energy Users Committee operates?
No.
Do you understand their leadership?
I understand their counsel. I'm not aware of any particular customer taking a leadership role.
And when you say their counsel, are you referring to their lawyer?
Yes.
Okay, and that would be Mr. Elliott, correct?
Yes.
Okay, but you're not aware that they have a president?
No.
And you're not aware that they have a vice president?
No.
You're not aware they have a treasurer?
No.
A board?
No.
You're not aware of how often they meet?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay, but you are testifying on behalf of them here today, is that correct?
Yes, someone needs to defend the industrial customers in this rate case.
Okay, very good. Now, do you understand that the Energy Users Committee maintains a website?
Yes, I've been on that website.
You have? Okay, very good. So you also would understand that they publish a list of their members on that website. And anybody, is that a yes? We have a court reporter. You need to say yes or no, Mr. Gray.
Yes.
Okay. And on that website, anybody can go and see who the membership consists of, the Energy Users Committee. Is that correct?
I will take your word for that. I've not memorized their website.
Okay, well, you're not going to have to take my word. I'm going to show you.
Wonderful.
So I'll start just to show you that I didn't make this up, but this does in fact come from the Energy Users Committee's website. That's their logo there. And I think I'm sorry, Chair Belzer, I keep leaning away from this microphone. You indicated that Mr. Elliott was their counsel, correct?
I believe that's what the record would show.
Okay. And it says right here, member companies, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I understand you didn't really know much about the leadership of the Energy Users Committee, but do you know how many members are within the Energy Users Committee? And if you want to take a minute, we can count them up.
I'll let you count them up.
Okay.
Mr.
Would you disagree with me that there are 34 member companies according to the website?
Do you want me to get up and count them?
No, I just asked you if would you disagree with me that I'm telling you that there are 34?
I can count them if you'd like me to.
I didn't ask you to count them, Mr. Gray. I just asked you if you disagreed with me.
Well, I can't give you an answer if I don't know if that's correct.
Count away.
Wonderful.
Yeah, go right ahead.
20 at Milliken, can you scroll down? 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33. 34, your count was correct, Mr. Burgess.
Okay,
well
thank you.
done.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. All right. And of these companies, Mr. Gray, only 7 take natural gas service under rate 35 and 35A. Isn't that correct?
I do not know that.
And isn't it true that Amic Farms is a rate 35 or 35A customer?
I do not know that.
And isn't it true that Boeing is a rate 35 customer?
I believe that to be the case, but I'm not certain of that.
Isn't it true that Georgia Pacific is a rate 35A customer?
I do not know that.
Isn't it true that Ingevity is a rate 35A customer?
I believe that to be the case.
Isn't it true that Michelin is a rate 35A customer?
I believe that to be the case.
Isn't it true that Schaefer Group USA is a rate 35 customer?
I have no idea.
And isn't it true that Swiss Chrono is a rate 35A customer?
I believe that's true.
Now, Dominion Energy, you've also heard that they provide interruptible gas service to certain members of the Energy Users Committee. Is that correct?
Yes, they provide interruptible gas service.
And isn't it true that Dominion Energy provides interruptible gas service to BASF?
I do not know.
And isn't it true that Dominion Energy provides Cooper River Partners with interruptible gas service?
I do not know that either.
And isn't it true that Dominion Energy provides DSM Nutritional with interruptible gas service?
I think that's accurate.
And isn't it true that the company provides Shaw Industry with interruptible gas service?
I don't know.
And isn't it true that the company provides West Rock with interruptible gas service?
Which mill is that?
Let me repeat my question. Isn't it true that West Rock is provided with interruptible gas service?
I believe you're referring to the Charleston mill, which is closed. But I don't know.
Oh,
So I would dispute that one.
You don't know. That's how I heard your answer. Thank you. And with respect to West Rock, you understand they're in the process of shutting down their operations, do you not?
I have seen that in a press release.
Okay. I'm just going to swap out this list here. Okay, so I have taken the liberty of highlighting all of the rate 35, rate 35A, and interruptible customers on this list here. And you would agree with me, would you not, Mr. Gray, that the only customers within the SECU membership who are being asked to transition to a new rate only consist of these customers. Is that correct?
I told you I did not know.
And isn't it true, Mr. Gray, that these customers do not adequately pay for the natural gas service for which they're being provided today?
I would not agree with that, no.
And isn't it true that because these customers do not adequately pay for the service for which they're enjoying, other customers must pick up that expense?
I would not agree with that, no.
And isn't it true that by transitioning these customers to a new rate, the subsidy that exists will be eliminated?
Which subsidy is that?
Mr. Gray, isn't it true that by transitioning these customers to a new rate, the subsidy that exists today will be eliminated?
The testimony that I heard earlier today had the large industrials subsidizing the residential. So I'm not following your question here. So I'm going to say that I do not agree with that.
And isn't it true, Mr. Gray, that by transitioning these new customers to a new rate, capacity will be freed up upon DESC's system to accommodate new growth?
Could you repeat that question?
Isn't it true that by transitioning these customers to a new rate, capacity will be freed up on DESC's system to accommodate new growth?
I believe we heard testimony yesterday that DESC is not able to guarantee capacity for industrial growth and that economic development prospects have been turned away. So I don't think I can agree with your assessment there, Mr. Burgess.
And isn't it true, Mr. Gray, that capacity cannot be freed up because the rate 35 customers do not want to give up their capacity?
So could you repeat the question?
Isn't it true that the rate 35 customers do not want to give up their capacity?
Rate 35 customers do not want to give up their capacity.
And by not giving up capacity, that prohibits the company from accommodating new growth in South Carolina. Isn't that true?
No. I don't believe the company is able to accommodate new growth in South Carolina. And I think it would be very difficult for them to take capacity from existing rate 35s and then give that to new factories that are considering relocating to South Carolina. That sounds like horrible policy that the Speaker of the House Smith, and the governor would not appreciate.
And what policy is that the Speaker has articulated that he would not appreciate?
So what I'm referring to here is economic policy for growth in South Carolina.
Right. And we talked about that earlier. Indeed, the governor said he mandates coordination, collaboration, and cooperation, right?
Sure does.
And you would agree with me that by not agreeing to transition to a new rate doesn't constitute collaboration, cooperation, or coordination, does it?
Industrial customers would have been delighted to collaborate prior to filing. And as Ms. Jackson testified yesterday, the only meetings she had were after the rates were filed. So there was not an opportunity to collaborate here. I would have loved to do so, but I was prevented from doing that by the process choices that DESC made.
Mr. Gray, was Texarkana invited to the settlement conferences?
I don't know the answer to that.
Did your counsel communicate with you about settlement conferences?
I was aware that they were happening.
Okay, so your answer is yes, you were aware of the settlement conferences.
Well, your question was, what was I invited? I don't know if I was invited, but I was aware of them.
Was Texarkana's lawyer invited to the settlement conferences?
I think so, but that's a better question for him.
Okay. Would you disagree with me that if he was invited, that would constitute an attempt to collaborate, coordinate, and cooperate?
Could you ask that question again?
If your counsel was invited to the settlement conference, would you agree with me that was an opportunity to coordinate, collaborate, and cooperate?
So in this case, I don't know.
Okay. Back to the list here on the Elmo, you do understand, do you not, Mr. Gray, that DESC has a contract to provide natural gas service to each one of these customers?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Isn't it true that the company has a contract to provide natural gas service to each one of these customers?
That's what you stated, yes.
And isn't it true that the company has a contract with Amick Farms?
I don't know.
Is it true they have a contract with Ingevity?
Yes, they do.
And how do you know that?
All of these contracts are posted on the South Carolina Public Service Commission docket.
That's right. That's right.
But I've not studied Amick Farms, BASFs. I've not looked at all of these.
But you are aware that they are on the Public Service Commission's website.
I am.
And if a contract is on the website, you would agree with me that a contract exists.
Yes, if a contract is on a website, then a contract exists. That seems reasonable.
And isn't it true that the contract indicates to the parties when the contract expires?
Yes.
And isn't it true that when a contract expires for these customers, that either party can terminate that contract upon 30 days written notice?
The contracts I've seen have that language in them.
Right. And as we sit here today, Mr. Gray, if Dominion wanted to terminate these contracts, it has the right to do so, correct?
Yes, with 30 days written notice after the expiration of the contract.
And the company has not done that, have they?
I'm not familiar with what you may or may not have done, Mr. Burgess.
You are aware, however, Mr. Gray, that the company has asked Rate 35 to be closed to new customers, correct?
Yes.
And isn't it true that for those existing customers, that it has provided them with a runway to transition to a favorable contract for which they qualify? Isn't that true?
I would take issue with your use of the word favorable.
And in fact, in the company's application, the company proposed to allow these customers until October of 2024 to transition to a new rate. Isn't that correct?
Yes, in the initial filing, yes.
And under the settlement agreement, the selling parties have agreed to extend that runway until April of 2025, correct?
Yes.
And you would agree with me, would you not, by extending that transition date to April 2025, that allows these customers to get through 2 winter heating seasons prior to the transmission. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And you would agree with me, Mr. Gray, that that was acceptable to Direct Energy, who's a marketer in South Carolina. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you would agree with me that that was acceptable to IGS, who's also a marketer in South Carolina.
Yes.
And you would agree with me that was acceptable to ORS, who represents the public interest in South Carolina, which includes every interest of every customer. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that was also acceptable to the Department of Consumer Affairs, correct?
Yes.
And you would agree with me that of these 7 customers who are on rate 35A, they have the ability to retain the services of a marketer, correct?
Customers on rate 35A, yes, they have the ability to retain the service of a marketer. But this is not about marketers. This is about the job creating rate 35 customers. We and other marketers perform a service for these industrial clients, but this is not about marketers.
Mr. Gray, in your testimony, you indicated that DESC had I think the words you used were they came perilously close to rolling blackouts. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you understand, do you not, that Dominion Energy was working to ensure that customers did not experience any natural gas outages? Is that correct?
Yes, I'm sure they were working very diligently.
And in fact, no outages occurred. Isn't that correct?
Yes, I believe that is true.
And isn't it true, Mr. Gray, that you Texaco nominates gas on a day-ahead basis to serve its customers?
That's correct.
And how much gas do you typically nominate to serve your existing DESC customers?
I would prefer not to disclose proprietary information about our customer base again.
Mr. Gray, I'm going to ask the question again. How much do you typically nominate on a gas basis to serve your existing customers?
I would prefer not to discuss the size of our business in South Carolina. That's confidential information.
Chair Belzer, I would ask that you direct the witness to answer my question.
Proprietary. I think it's protected. There's no foundation laid to convince me or the commission otherwise.
Well, you don't get to speak for the commission. You can speak for yourself.
But I'm able to argue that there's no foundation for you to compel him, factual foundation for you to compel him to disclose the amount.
Chair Belzer, Mr. Gray has indicated in his direct testimony that the company came perilously close to not being able to serve its customers. Mr. Gray represents Texacan, who enters into contracts with customers who are also customers of Dominion Energy South Carolina.
I understand, Mr. Burgess, but how he doesn't represent all. So how I'm not sure how his customers, what he nominates for his customers, may lead to that.
His customers are also the company's customers.
I understand. Well, some of his customers are also the company's customers, but
correct.
If we have to hear it, we're gonna have to close the session.
Okay, I'll move on from that fact. And I don't want to disclose any of your confidential information, Mr. Gray, but would it surprise you to learn that prior to December 17th, Texacan was nominating a significant amount of gas to serve its customers?
We dominated a volume of gas to serve our customers.
Okay. And would you be surprised to learn that during the days of December 1 to December 16th that your customers were indeed using that gas?
I would not be surprised to learn that customers were using gas, no.
Would you be surprised to learn that on December the 17th, that where Texacan was previously nominating significant sums, that it ceased nominating significant sums of gas?
I don't know how to make the distinction between significant and insignificant. We nominated non-zero sums every day.
Well, I'm doing my best not to release your confidential information according to you.
Appreciate that.
So you'll just have to bear with me as I kind of work through the significant and the non-significant. Would you agree with me that zero is non-significant?
We did not nominate a zero volume any day. We nominated a positive volume every day.
How much?
It's proprietary information.
Would you agree with me, Mr. Gray, between December 17th and December 27th, you nominated less than 100 decatherms of gas?
I would have to go back and check that.
Okay. Isn't it true during Winter Storm Elliott, gas prices spiked?
Yes.
And isn't it true that you were, prior to Winter Storm Elliott, you were nominating significant sums of natural gas and then stopped nominating significant sums of natural gas?
I don't know how to make that distinction, Mr. Burgess.
And you were able to not nominate significant sums of natural gas because you knew that Dominion Energy South Carolina would stand behind rate 35. Is that correct?
Dominion Energy South Carolina offers a standby service to its customers, and those customers pay a demand charge for that availability of gas.
My question was, Mr. Gray, you knew Dominion Energy would stand by and serve those customers when you decided to not nominate significant sums of gas like you've done in the past during the Winter Storm Elliott, correct?
We nominated gas to DESC every day.
And you don't want to tell me how many, right?
No, I don't want to tell you my customers'
Of course you don't.
names or how many they are.
And I don't blame you, Mr. Gray. I wouldn't want to tell me either. Chair Belzer, that's all the questions I have.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. I really hate not to finish a witness, but we needed to stop around 5. And so we're gonna stop here for the day, and we'll come back at 9:30 in the morning. And Mr. Gray, you'll be on the stand, and I'm gonna ask you not discuss your testimony with anyone or let anybody discuss it with you.
Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Is there anything before we close? Anything briefly before we close? And y'all may need to figure out tomorrow if we need to put up witnesses out of order to make sure that we can handle conflicts. If y'all will do that in the morning, I'd appreciate it. Thank you very much. We are in recess until 9:30 tomorrow morning.